Let's begin in welcoming our board chair, Mr. Baljit Dhaliwal. Our vice chair, Rory Morgan. David Bennett from Fortis, BC. Rick Mann of IOM Property Group. Raj Sidhu of Colliers International. He's on his way. Sasha Ramnarine of Remedios and Company. Mike Spiess from Scotiabank. Thank you all for attending. The Surrey Board of Trade is Surrey's city-building business organization. Our mandate is to support business, bring business into the city. We're one of the top 10 largest chambers of commerce boards of trades in Canada. There's 430 of us, and we have a very diversified and unique service portfolio. We represent around 6,000 member contacts. And to tell you a little bit more about the Surrey Board of Trade and our great city of Surrey, please turn your attention to the screen for a video. As one of the fastest growing cities in Canada, Surrey is an opportunity city. The Surrey Board of Trade is the concierge of connections.
Rick Mann from IOM Property Group. I'm a Director of Development and Construction. We rely on the Surrey Board of Trade for a lot of advocacy and research that we don't actively go out and find. Really, like there's things on there that I had no idea about, and I get the email, I get the web link, and it really affects us in a big way.
The Surrey Board of Trade is focused on making Surrey an opportunity city by instigating change at the different levels of government, offering a variety of business support services, international trade support services, and being the concierge of connections for the business community in Surrey.
My name is Rowena Rosati. I'm the Vice President of Healthcare and Innovation here at the Health and Technology District by the Lark Group. We focus on a lot of health and technologies and how we can bring different technologies and innovative healthcare solutions into the hands of clinicians. So there's a tremendous amount of information and support that Surrey Board of Trade offers to these companies, and it's an opportunity for me to be able to translate what the Surrey Board of Trade is doing for some of those companies and helping those companies to succeed.
If it's in the agricultural sector or in the retail sector, if they're needing a government connection, if they have an issue related to government, we are there for them, and we have a proven track record of success to ensure that businesses are helped when they need it in a timely way.
You know, the Surrey Board of Trade it's a great organization because anybody who is involved in that organization wants to be a more proactive member of the community. So having an opportunity to connect and network with those individuals helps our business become better.
So the Surrey Board of Trade offers an immense amount of support for businesses at all levels, including entrepreneurs and startup businesses. There are resources that help a business that they wouldn't necessarily be able to afford to contract on their own, and it allows those to be accessible, sometimes free of cost. It also creates opportunities for networking.
Whether you're a new business that's just opening up shop in Surrey, Surrey Board of Trade has to be one of your top destinations. It will connect you with a lot of the great minds in the organization, a lot of great minds in the community that can help.
So whether you're a small business or a medium-sized business or a large business, starting out or expanding, we have the connections. We have the resources to ensure that you have what you need during your journey as an entrepreneur. So ladies and gentlemen, today's event is focused on BC Hydro. And BC Hydro is very important to Surrey's economy. It aligns with much of the policy work and economic work that the Surrey Board of Trade engages in as it relates to our transportation team, our development and land use team, our environment and infrastructure team, our youth team. The list goes on. BC Hydro is a foundation in driving our economy forward, in driving innovation forward in how we run our businesses and how we live as residents right here in Surrey. The Surrey Technology and Skills Center, the second location for the Surrey Board of Trade that we just purchased in Surrey's Health and Technology District that you saw on our video, is really going to be focused on starting up and scaling up technology businesses to address the labor and skill challenges that we are facing in each of our industries. And I know BC Hydro is also facing similar challenges around talent recruitment. We all need to work collaboratively as a city and also as a region within Metro Vancouver and within the Cascadia Economic Corridor as a region with our U.S. partners. And that's what the Surrey Board of Trade is focused on. We look forward to hearing from BC Hydro this afternoon. I ask you to please think of questions or comments that you would like to ask the President and CEO after his remarks. And remember, we're all here to drive our economic future forward together as a city and as a region. So ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce your keynote speaker for this afternoon. He is the President and CEO of BC Hydro, BC's largest crown corporation, the fourth largest company in British Columbia as ranked by annual revenue. He built his career at BC Hydro, starting out as an engineer in training, fresh out of university in 1990. During his 32-year career, he's held positions throughout the organization and across BC, including roles working with customers, leading operations, overseeing capital projects, and managing risk for BC Hydro's trading subsidiary, PowerX. He is a professional engineer, holds a master's degree in business administration. He has a global focus on climate change and the electrification of the devices in our homes, vehicles, and industries. And ladies and gentlemen, he is here today to talk about how BC Hydro is helping our customers, residential and commercial, today and tomorrow. Please help me welcome the President and CEO of BC Hydro, Mr. Chris O'Reilly.
Thank you, Anita, for your kind introduction. It sounds way more interesting when you say it that way. I want to thank all of you for the warm welcome. Thank you for being here today and making the extra effort to come in this crazy weather we're experiencing. I want to start by acknowledging with gratitude that we're fortunate to be gathered here on the traditional unceded territory of the coastal First Nations, coastal Salish First Nations, in particular the Katzie, the Kwantlen, and the Semiahmoo. We acknowledge the impacts that our system and our operations have had on these nations and on the land that they've made use of since time immemorial. And we share in the responsibility to act as stewards of those lands and care for the resources. I'd also like to congratulate the new mayor and council here in Surrey following last month's elections. It's a big changes around the province, and we look forward to working together on projects that will continue to support this growing community and advance the city's economic development. The city of Surrey is an important hub for BC Hydro. It's where we train our tradespeople. We have a trades training center here. It's where we store and send out all the materials we use to keep the lights on in the province. It's a critical connection point for our system. Our transmission system comes together in Surrey, and it connects the interior with the rest of the Lower Mainland, with Vancouver Island, and down into the US. Each one of you is a customer, and as your city grows, we grow with you. For example, we recently completed a new substation, the Fleetwood substation in Surrey, so we can continue to provide clean, reliable power to support the growth of the city. We're really excited to see what the future holds for Surrey, and we look forward to supporting your growth with clean electricity. Well, I know some of you in the room, many of us have never met before, so as Anita said, I've been the president here for about 5 years. I've been with BC Hydro since 1990. One of my first introductions to BC Hydro and electricity was actually in Surrey. In the late 70s, I went with my parents to an open house at the brand new research and development facility of BC Hydro on 88th Avenue. It's now called PowerTech Labs and is a subsidiary of BC Hydro. I happen to be the chair. At that time and for years after, they've been developing groundbreaking solutions for the utility industry, generation, transmission, and distribution, solutions that have been adopted around the world. So PowerTech is still here in Surrey. They employ more than 200 highly skilled scientists, engineers, researchers, technical specialists. We have our new CEO, Pierre Poulin, is in the audience. Maybe you could give a wave, Pierre. He just joined us in the spring. We're really pleased to have you with us. So PowerTech today is one of the largest utility testing and research labs in North America, really important part of BC Hydro. So our first experience there, almost, I guess, 40-some years ago, certainly opened my eyes to the fact that you can turn water into electricity, and that's something that still fascinates me after all these years and all these decades at BC Hydro. I know most of you aren't thinking about where your electricity comes from, and most of you only think about it if the power goes out. So right now we're in the midst of storm season, and our crews are out there in full force. We had quite an event last night with the snow and the wind. We had 85,000 customers impacted. We're down below 10,000 out today, and our crews are out working hard to get everybody back. And these are folks on the island, in the Gulf Islands, and a few left in the Lower Mainland. What strikes me as I look back on my career is how the frequency and intensity of storms has changed. So at the beginning of November, we were hit by a pretty big event. So you'll recall that storm. We had 400,000 customers out in the province, and there were 43,000 here in Surrey impacted by that event. And it was a pretty major storm for us. So it ranked in the top 3 in terms of customer impacts over the last 20 years or so. So quite a significant event. We had 98% of our customers restored within 36 hours, and that's something we work really hard at, something we're proud of, and something we're always trying to improve upon. This is only one of the many significant and sometimes devastating events that we've witnessed and responded to over the past few years. We've seen forest fires like the one in Lytton that destroyed an entire community. We've experienced heat domes and severe wind, flooding, and ice storms. And more recently, the extreme heat and very little rain that we experienced over the summer and into the fall had a significant impact on vegetation, on the rivers, and on the fish in many of those rivers, particularly on the island and the south coast. So we know much of our extreme weather that we're experiencing is due to climate change. So we need to talk about the effect that's having and what we do about it. We know British Columbia is one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and I think we're all grateful to live here, to work here. However, greenhouse gas emissions per person in BC have been steadily rising since 2015. As a result of global emissions, the average temperature in all regions of British Columbia has risen by 1.2 degrees Celsius, with higher increases as you move north, as happens with climate change. Energy use, and specifically burning of fossil fuels, is a key driver in that. However, we have something in BC that is part of the solution, and that is water. About 98% of the power that BC Hydro generates comes from clean or renewable resources, and most of that is water. Yet nearly 70% of the energy that British Columbians use comes from fossil fuels, and that's something that needs to change. We have to stop burning stuff. And that's why our province has set an aggressive target of reducing climate-changing emissions by 40% by 2030. If we want to meet the ambitious and necessary climate change goals the province has set for us in the Clean BC plan, we do need to use more clean electricity instead of fossil fuels to power our economy and our lives. We rely on hydroelectricity, the power of moving or falling water, to produce clean electricity for our 4 million customers. We have 30 hydroelectric plants in our system, and we have another one coming, Site C, in northern British Columbia on the Peace River. When it's up and running, Site C will provide British Columbians with an additional 1,100 megawatts of firm capacity and 5,100 gigawatt hours of clean energy each year. That's about 8% of our current supply, enough power to serve about 500,000 homes, or conversely, 1.7 million electric vehicles. I'll just point out a few things. This is quite a photo and probably not obvious. You can see the Peace River looking downstream at the top of the picture, so the upstream portion is to your left. The Earthfill Dam cuts across to the upper corner. It's about 1 kilometer across. Our year-end elevation is 445 meters, which is a couple meters more than our target was. And it's by volume, it's 87% finished, the dam itself. And that big structure that you see on the right of the picture is it's the abutment for the dam. It's a roller compacted concrete, a massive structure that forms the right abutment of the dam. And the water will actually enter the facility on this side of the abutment. It's called an approach channel, and that's on the right-hand side. So we're constructing that, which is a bunch of layers of material to keep the water from flowing under. And then you see the powerhouse, which is the structure on the other side of that concrete structure. And so the powerhouse is fully enclosed, and we're installing the turbine generators there. So quite a thing if you go there, and it's actually hard to envision from one point, because if you get far enough back to see the whole thing, you're too far away to make out any detail, and when you get close, it's hard to see the scale. So unbelievable project. And we're about we'll be about 3/4 finished by the year-end, calendar year-end. So when it comes to generating clean power, we're already in a good position. We'll be in a bit better position when Site C's in service. And that's because we have abundant natural resources like water, and that makes our power the cleanest in Western North America at 98% clean. By comparison, our nearest neighbor is second, and that's Washington State. They're 85% clean. Idaho is third at 78%. The lowest ranking jurisdictions in the West are Utah at 9% and Alberta at 10%. So we have a lead compared to other regions in the West, and that's an advantage for us for sure. And in addition, we expect to have more power than we need until the late 20s. And as a result, we can encourage customers to increasingly turn to clean electricity as their alternative choice of fuel for heating and for transportation, and all of which will help reduce greenhouse gases and help keep our rates low. So to get where we need to go, we do need to make a shift and encourage electrification. And that may be a new term to some of you, but it simply means replacing technologies that are currently powered by fossil fuels like gasoline and diesel and natural gas with alternatives like electricity, alternatives that use electricity. Things like switching to an electric vehicle, replacing an old gas furnace with a heat pump, replacing diesel equipment used by industry. Those are just a few examples. We have a long history of conservation in BC Hydro in our province, and it dates back to when our Power Smart program was started in 1989. And over the past decade, annual savings from our conservation activities are total about 5,400 gigawatt hours per year. Again, about the equivalent of 500,000 homes, and roughly the same as we'll get from the Site C project. So a significant contribution. We absolutely need to continue to encourage conservation. It's an important part of the province's overall climate plan. And we need to encourage our customers to be more power smart by using clean electricity to replace things that have been traditionally powered by fossil fuels. But electrification is not about using more for the sake of using more. It's about increasingly using our clean energy smartly as an essential resource and for its highest and best purpose to make a difference in the face of climate change. So conservation and electrification go very well together, and we need both. So I want to talk about our electrification plan. With a global focus on climate change and the electrification of more devices, more homes, businesses, vehicles, and industries, we're committed to helping our customers, both current customers and future customers, make the switch to clean electricity powered by water. We're advancing our electrification plan by offering customer incentives, tools, business-to-business support. We're helping industries shift their operations to highly efficient, clean electricity, and we're bringing new clean tech industries to BC that are looking for clean power to run their businesses. And we're working with First Nation communities to meet their goals of advancing climate action and building reliance on renewable energy sources, and in particular in remote areas where we rely on diesel generation for electricity. Over the next 5 years, BC Hydro is investing $260 million to advance electrification, and the goal is to encourage and incent residents and businesses to switch from fossil fuels to clean electricity. And the plan will see us adding about 3,100 gigawatt hours of new load or demand to our system, and that's about 5% of our total. It's coincidentally about the amount of energy used or amount of electricity used in the city of Surrey. And that will avoid putting 930,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere every year, about the equivalent of 200,000 vehicles coming off the road. And the way it works for us is by selling more of the electricity we already have in the near term. We expect that by 2026, rates will be 1.6% lower than they would otherwise have been without the plan. Attracting new businesses across the province and also in places like Surrey and elsewhere will support our growing our green economy here in BC. So to break down the plan, I want to start by looking at homes and businesses. In BC, most businesses, most buildings are using multiple fuels. And as you would know from your own experience, here in Surrey, electricity is used to power your lights and electronics and devices. It's not used for everything inside many of your homes and businesses. And we think about heat and water, for example. In fact, electricity is only used to heat about 40% of homes and about 50% of commercial buildings. And many still rely on fossil fuels like natural gas. And some use natural gas appliances and water heaters as well. Space and water heating represents most of a home or building's energy consumption and 11% of BC's greenhouse gas emissions. Most British Columbians don't realize that home heating is one of their biggest carbon emitters. So heating a typical single-family home entirely with gas is equivalent to, well, it releases about 2 tons of carbon dioxide, and that's equivalent to driving a gas-powered vehicle 8,000 kilometers a year. So our goal with building electrification is to help our customers move away from homes and buildings heated by fossil fuels towards those powered by clean electricity. So where do we start and how do we change this? Advancing electrification in residential homes would mean BC homes converting from natural gas to electricity by replacing their furnaces with air source heat pumps. Heat pumps are one of the ways that you can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, and they're very efficient, and they do also reduce overall energy consumption. Plus, they offer the 2-for-1 benefit. You get heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. For those interested in making the switch to using a heat pump, there are significant rebates available. Residential customers can save up to $11,000. And these benefits are the reason a growing number of British Columbians are making the switch. From 2021 to 22, we saw rebate applications nearly double from 2,200 to 4,200. So we're seeing an uptick in demand. Commercial buildings offer another opportunity for electrification and emissions reductions. There are many options available for electrification of buildings, including electric heat and electric hot water heaters. Making it easier for businesses to switch from fossil fuels to electricity is a fundamental part of our plan. To support electrification in the commercial building sector, we'll provide customer incentives for fuel switching measures in retrofit and new construction, as well as expand our Energy Manager program. One great example of electrification here in Surrey is the Jessie Lee Elementary School, which is in South Surrey. The school replaced 17 gas-fired rooftop HVAC units with 17 high-efficiency heat pumps, and those pumps are now heating and cooling the building, and they've resulted in a 40% reduction in the school's greenhouse gas emissions, and because they're so efficient, they've reduced the overall energy consumption. We're also supporting the new Surrey Hospital and Cancer Center in Cloverdale, which is expected to include all-electric hot water and space heating, all-electric steam, and all-electric kitchen equipment. And when the hospital is built, it's expected to be one of the first all-electric net zero emission hospitals in Canada. If we meet our targets for home and commercial buildings, the impact will be significant. We're looking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 200,000 tons in the next 5 years, which is equivalent to nearly 25,000 homes. Transportation is another area of big opportunity. BC has the highest electric vehicle adoption rate in North America, and that's notwithstanding the supply chain challenges that have been experienced. There's been quite a demand for electric vehicles here over the last 2 years, and that's linked both to a climate action commitment by people in BC, but also increasingly high oil and gas prices. And that may not be a huge surprise since Metro Vancouver has experienced the highest gas prices that we've ever seen in North America. We now have more than 80,000 electric vehicles on the roads in BC, and that represented 13% of light-duty vehicle sales toward the end of 2021. And that's 80,000 vehicles that are no longer powered by fossil fuels and are now powered by water. And the expectation is this will rise to 635,000 by 2030. Transportation in aggregate accounts for 40% of the province's greenhouse gas emissions. So to reduce these emissions, we do need to help drivers, particularly of light-duty vehicles, switch from carbon-emitting gas and diesel to clean electricity powered by water. To encourage drivers to make the switch, there are provincial rebates and federal rebates worth up to $9,000, and they can be used to purchase an EV here in BC. There's rebates available for homes and workplaces to install chargers, and we've seen a 83% increase in the rebates being paid out this year compared to last. Single-family homes can get a rebate of up to half the purchase and installation costs of level 2 chargers, up to a maximum of $350. And this applies for duplexes or townhomes with private garages or dedicated parking. Apartment and condo buildings can get rebates of up to $2,000 per charger to purchase and install level 2 EV chargers in their buildings' residential parking spaces. And this is where we're seeing some of the biggest growth over the last year through our EV Ready program, and this helps condo buildings prepare for electric vehicle adoption. The increase has been quite something. We've had a 5 times growth in the number of condos that are working towards providing parking stall with an electrical connection, so it's ready when a customer, a resident wants to install a level 2 charger. So more and more condo buildings are taking this strategic approach of providing access to EV charging for all their parking spots, not just offering 1 or 2 or a handful of chargers. We're also working to encourage EV adoption by installing and expanding our own BC Hydro-owned public charging infrastructure. We've got 124 units at 80 sites around the province, as you can see on all the main corridors, and we're growing that number to 325 units at 145 locations by the end of 2025. So we've got 34 chargers here at 20 sites in the Lower Mainland, 5 of them at 3 sites right here in Surrey. Our Cloverdale site was one of the first locations we expanded to a 100 kilowatt charging unit, the first 100 kilowatt charger in our fast charging network, and that can add about 100 kilometers of driving to an average electric vehicle in about 10 minutes of charging. When our public charging network is complete, you'll be able to drive from one end of Vancouver Island to the other, from Surrey to the Alberta border, and from the southern part of the province all the way to the Yukon border, knowing you'll have access to reliable charging along the way. And it will all be powered by water. In addition to our public fast charging network, we're working on other ways to support electric vehicle adoption. We want to raise public awareness about the benefits of driving an EV, including lower fuel prices and significantly reduced greenhouse gas emissions. We're providing up to $30 million in incentives for the electrification of transportation, including buses and ferries and commercial fleets. And we're studying funding and project incentives for mid and heavy-duty fleets. Finally, when we look at the industrial sector, we see another area of significant opportunity. Our industrial sector is made up of over 47,000 individual sites, ranging from large mines and sawmills to very small niche sites, and they account collectively for 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions, mostly due to compressors in the natural gas sector, diesel engines in mining and forestry, and process heat in the forest sector. Industry represents the largest electrification opportunity for us. More of the energy used to power industry could be supplied by electricity, both by switching from diesel and gas to electricity at existing facilities and by choosing to use electricity in new facilities instead of fossil fuels. Through our electrification plan, we are supporting the sector by providing funding to industrial customers to embed strategic energy management in their organizations. A great example of an industrial customer that has taken steps to electrify is the Copper Mountain Mine near Princeton, and they produce about 100 million pounds of copper and other metals each year. And we help support their haul truck trolley assist project, which enabled hybrid mining trucks to be powered by hydroelectricity instead of diesel for a portion of their operation as they come out of the pit. And the project will reduce or is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It protects them against rising diesel prices, and it is improving their production. It's a really exciting opportunity. Electrification in the industrial sector also includes attracting new clean energy or clean industry to BC, including hydrogen production, carbon capture, synthetic fuel production, and data centers. We are seeing globally companies who are trying to improve their environmental, their social, and governance profile and respond to their own customers who are increasingly demanding clean products. With our strong climate policies and programs, with the technical expertise we have in BC and the clean hydroelectricity, we are well positioned to attract new energy-intensive industries and companies that are focused on their environmental footprint and impact. In the first year, we've made some good progress on our electrification plan. As I mentioned, heat pump rebate applications have increased significantly. We're seeing more drivers make the switch to an EV and more homes, condos, and workplaces installing access to EV charging. We've got 17 active programs that we manage, either fund ourselves or manage on behalf of the provincial government to encourage residents and businesses to switch from fossil fuels to clean electricity. On the commercial and industrial side, we are on track to exceed our annual target for new connected load and industrial load. And these are just a few of the examples, among others, that will help us reach our targets over the next 4 years of our 5-year plan. And all of this is in an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by encouraging the use of clean electricity powered by water. We know climate change is threatening our way of life, and the water we use to power our clean electricity is part of the solution. Some have asked if we have enough power to electrify the province, and I know that's on the minds of many, and the answer to that is yes, we do. We expect to have more power than we need until towards the end of the decade, and then we will get more power. We haven't always got it right in terms of forecasting how much power we will need, and in the past, we purchased too much power at the wrong time from independent power producers, and this resulted in higher rates for our customers and put pressure on our customers. Over the past 5 years, we've significantly improved our financial and planning systems, and as a result, rate increases in this time have remained well below inflation. And rates this year on April 1st actually went down by 1.4%. And this underlies how important timing is. However, we know that predicting the future is very, very difficult. We can't plan for one scenario, we have to plan for a range of scenarios and a range of possibilities. Through our integrated resource plan, we have planned for scenarios that see demand increasing, remaining flat, or even the possibility of decreasing, all to ensure that our rates remain affordable. We're planning for a future that includes more clean electricity. We know wind and solar projects can be built more quickly than large hydroelectric projects, and that means we will be able to respond to customer demand and bring on more power at the right time to ensure we're getting the best value for our customers. As I mentioned throughout, we are fortunate to have many hydroelectric projects that serve as a backbone for our system. They allow us to ramp production up and down quickly when they're needed, and they're always available and there. So water can be stored behind the dam for when it's required, charging in our reservoirs like a battery. And that's particularly important as we consider a future with more wind and solar, which we know are not always there and producing when we need them. So delivering clean and reliable and affordable power to British Columbians is definitely our priority. And to do that, we have to get the timing right, and that's exactly what we're planning for. Climate change is the result of decisions made many generations ago and that we continue to make every day. But there are opportunities that come with the challenges we face. And unlike many jurisdictions, our electricity has almost no greenhouse gas emissions. And that's really important in a carbon-constrained world. We can use our electricity to power vehicles and businesses and industries of the future, making clean electricity powered by water one of our most effective climate solutions. And since reducing our carbon output is the biggest challenge we face, and perhaps we've ever faced, each of us has a stake in that too. And I hope you share our enthusiasm for what's next. So we need to be ready, and BC Hydro is ready and for a better future and one that is powered by water. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time and look forward to answering any questions that you have.
So ladies and gentlemen, if you do have a question, please go to the microphone in the middle of the room. State your name, your company name, and your question very succinctly, or your comment. So go ahead and approach the microphone, but I'm going to start with the first question. And let's talk about a brave new electricity future. And you referenced this a little bit in your remarks. Just tell us about 2050. BC may need to double or triple its power generation for transportation, buildings, industry. Current output, as we understand, is generated with 32 hydro dams. Can the province build more hydro plants? How many hydro plants are needed? And are there alternative funding options for what we need to do for our future?
So to meet the 2050 targets for the province, it's not all on electrification, and our forecasts don't see us requiring that much electricity, and that's a lot of electricity. Having gone through the construction of Site C for the last 7 years, I can tell you that that's a lot of electricity. The Clean BC plan is a multifaceted plan that relies on a number of pathways, including getting carbon out of the natural gas system, using alternate energy media like hydrogen, ideally produced not all with electricity because that puts it on the electricity system as well. Conservation is a big part of the Clean BC plan, like actually using less energy as we see with the school in South Surrey. So all of these things have to come together to allow us to meet our climate targets. And so the electrification is one of the pathways. It's not the only pathway. And so we believe, and it is the subject of our integrated resource plan that is before the Utilities Commission, that we can deliver our part of the plan and we can get those resources in a way that meets the needs of our stakeholders, meets the needs of First Nations, and meets the needs of our customers and is affordable.
So can you tell us a little bit about the Beautification Fund for local governments? So here we are, we're building a city from the ground up.
Yeah.
And our development and construction sector is thriving. How are you providing assistance with the undergrounding of electrical system infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question, Anita. Generally, we're an overhead utility. Like we have 80,000 kilometers of transmission and distribution lines, and we often get the question, can we put them all underground? And especially after storms, people say, can you put them underground? It isn't really feasible economically to do that. On a case-by-case basis, often in subdivision developments, we work with the developer and they actually pay the incremental cost of putting the lines underground, and that's part of the aesthetic of the development. We do have a beautification fund. It's a relatively small amount of money that is generally available to cities to help them in beautification projects. Often that's on downtown streets. That is getting more difficult these days given the volume of connections that we have and also the number of other parties that are on the poles, because we share the poles with TELUS and the telecom providers as well for the cell systems. So we've actually suspended in the near term the beautification efforts, partly just because of the volume of interconnection work that we're doing on this system. But we absolutely want to work with municipalities and developers where there are those opportunities and to put infrastructure underground and work out the funding for that.
To the audience, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Darlene Seligman, Artos Developments Limited, but the question's not from a Surrey resident. I just renovated my condo, did an extensive renovation, and I learned that I couldn't get a rebate for the heat pump because I was in a condo.
Yeah.
I'm asking for reconsidering that process because of the heat dome that we had last year, and we lost several residents, and a lot of them lived in condominiums. Yeah. And secondly, my condo might be larger than a bungalow in Surrey. So I was just wondering if there's any thoughts about that or considerations.
Yeah, the programs, there's a range of programs available, and there's funding for heat pumps from the federal government and from the province, and there's a bit of a top-up from BC Hydro as well. So certainly we work as hard as we can to align with the provincial government on the R2 programs, and sometimes we're just a bit disconnected with the feds, and that's just a bit of a nature of the system. We do look at the programs from time to time. We're relatively early in this, and I'm happy to take feedback on the design of the programs and the eligibility. A lot of times in condo units, they're not really suited for individual solutions, so I think that's why we haven't targeted that sector with a program at this point, but we're happy to take the feedback and look at the design of the programs and see what could be changed over time.
Thank you for that. So is there, like a lot of these older buildings, like my building's quite old, and so is there incentives for stratas to incorporate the heat pump system?
Yeah, there's different programs available, and we can probably take that up with you offline. We've got some folks here that could go through the detailed programs, but so far we haven't targeted the multi-unit buildings for heat pumps, particularly in renovations. But if that's a growing opportunity, I mean, we're always willing to adjust and modify going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Any other audience questions? Sean?
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, thank you for coming out today. We really appreciate it. I think most of the developers in this room are very much in favor of working together with industry to solve these electrification needs that we have. There seems to be a real lack of understanding of, because of the immigration of this area, how fast areas are growing, and so areas are way behind in the power supply. So how would we be able to work with hydro that we can advance power into neighborhoods ahead of, get in front of the development, so that some connections are taking up to a couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of focus on interconnections right now for us, and the volume is up, and the complexity is up as well. We did partly the reason we built that substation, the Fleetwood substation that I mentioned, was to replace a bunch of old, obsolete and end-of-life small substations, and ensure we had the capacity at the substation level to support the growth. We are in the process of building out the feeders from that substation, and that's a big investment going on. I think one of the issues we've heard from developers is we have an extension policy that's part of our tariff. It's part of the rules that we operate, and that puts that makes it difficult to kind of build on spec for developments, as you're saying, and it puts quite a bit of onus on the first developer to come forward to pay for that infrastructure, and then it takes time to put it in place. So we are reviewing the extension policy and taking input on different ways that could be done. The imperative around housing, like, we're very conscious of the pressures on communities, and with the in-migration in a place like British Columbia and Canada in general, we need more housing, and we're working closely with municipalities and others to try and make that happen. So I hear you, and as we look at the extension policy, I think there can be opportunities to make that process quicker and fund it in different ways, right? Rather than putting it all on the first developer or the first customer that comes to the fore.
Oh, that's great. Can I ask another question?
Sure.
In regards to solar panels, they're void of any rebates currently. So is Hydro looking at potentially adding solar panels into the rebate system?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So in our province, because we've already got a clean system, like, solar panels don't help, right? Like, you put a solar panel on the roof of your house, it does nothing for climate change here, right? Because the only way you help fight climate change is you have to not burn something, right? So the solar panels just add more clean energy into the mix, which we're selling south of the border at the margin, right? So we're not including solar panels as part of our climate or electrification plan. We do see solar along with wind as a great resource in the future, and we would expect rooftop solar to be part of the mix when we go out for more energy down the road. And I should say, we actually have a program today. If you want to put rooftop solar on, we have a great program that people sign up for. We have 6,000 units of rooftop solar in the province, and it's continued to grow every year. But it's not a climate benefit. Like, it doesn't help, right?
Third thing, in addition to that, what you just talked about, would there be any interest in Hydro upping the meter to above 100,000 kilowatts? But there's reciprocal agreements, so that if you had, say, a light industrial park and you wanted to put rooftop across?
Yeah, that's our, you're talking about our, we have a net metering program which governs when people put rooftop solar on, what the flow can be back, and it's, I think it's 100 kilowatts is the limit. And that, we are going to go back to the commission for a review of the net metering program, and we've certainly had that feedback. There are the system is set up to generally for power to flow one way, and within limits, we can accommodate kind of bi-directional. There are a point where that becomes an issue technically, but that question is going to be the subject of this proceeding, and we'll certainly look at it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sean.
Any other audience questions? Go ahead.
Jeff Pinkerton with Solaris.
Oh, hi, Jeff.
Our company is actively involved in LNG facilities, natural gas compression. We were kicking around the numbers in the office the other day, and we're actively involved in projects that are, 60% of Site C.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we're looking at big numbers.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to go back to Anita's question about capacity. You indicated that you were confident in the capacity to the 2020s, and that's
Yeah.
where we are now.
Well, the late
Late
2020s, I said, yeah.
So what
We're at the
happens
early
then?
2020s.
Yeah, that's true. What happens then? What happens in the
Well,
late 20s?
I mean, that's the subject of our plan, right? So we've got a 20-year plan before the commission with a range of scenarios. And one of the scenarios we're looking at is a big build-out on the North Coast, which is, you know, where a lot of these LNG projects are, like LNG Canada Phase 1 and 2 and Cedar, and the Kylissums project is out there as well. And there's a transmission issue with that we're working on, and we've got potential projects around, and there's an energy and capacity challenge. One of the great things right now in this province is we've got more potential new industrial projects than we've ever had, right? And the only comparison is if you go back 10 years, and we had a boom, as you can recall, in LNG projects before, and we had a lot of projects on the go, but they were all LNG projects. So now what I would say about the hopper of industrial projects, it is broader. You know, it includes lots of mining projects. There's gas processing in the upstream. There's LNG export terminals. There's some pipelines in there. There's some hydrogen and some clean tech type of projects. They are ways off from making commitments, and we know they're not all going to come, right? That's just the way of the world, right? Not every project that gets considered goes to fruition. So we call it kind of watching the signposts. We're in really close contact with our customers and potential customers, these, you know, developers. We're in close ties with government around the permitting process, and we're watching how these things progress and making sure we've got good plans in place. And it's a pretty tricky thing, right? Because you get, you know, we know that you get adverse economic conditions, not unlike what we've got now with inflation, and that things can get kicked down the road. We've seen a whole bunch of projects get pushed out, you know, around. So we're absolutely on that problem, and we have plans in place to respond as we go, and in particular on that North Coast corridor.
Are those new plans new dams? Because Site C took 40 years.
So we're not, just put that on the table. We're not planning. I mean, we're not planning on building another Site C project, right? Because it's been way more challenging, I think, than was anticipated. It's taken, you know, a good, depending how you count, a good 15 years to get to this point where we're 3/4 done, and the impacts of that are, you know, while the benefits get spread across the province, the impacts on it are pretty fall pretty hard on the valley and the region, right? So we don't have any plans today to build another big dam like that. So if you look in our integrated resource plan and both the base plan and the contingencies that we've got, We've got to build out of renewables like wind and solar. We're currently relying for incremental capacity on things like batteries, which are becoming much more prevalent for the managing the peak, and they can be located around the system. We do have some capacity resources like Revelstoke 6 that we could bring online. That's a 6-unit at an existing generating station. We're investing in the transmission system, so there's things you can do to the transmission system to get more capacity, kind of debottlenecking projects to get more capacity. And then on the non-asset side, we've got quite a bit of efforts around changing the behavior and how people use electricity. So working to get, for example, vehicle charging out of the day and into the night. We've got a rate structure that we're going to bring forward that we think is pretty exciting about that. And that's a really important way to manage the load, get it off the peak, because we have lots of capacity at night, less so during the day. And looking at industrial versions of that as well to help manage. But I guess I'd encourage you to look at the plan. And one of the things I say to stakeholders and regulators and the government is we have time, because these things don't happen overnight, right? The vehicle fleet doesn't turn over overnight. People aren't going to switch their furnaces out overnight. And these major industrial projects, we know from experience, they make decisions over time, right? So we think with the plans we have in place, we can respond over time and meet the needs of the province and keep the rates affordable overall, which is really important, right?
Great, thank
so
you.
that's the plan.
Any other audience questions? Can you speak to the BC government's BC Hydro Review? What is that?
BC Hydro Review, well, they did, I'm not 100% sure, so they did a comprehensive review of BC Hydro when this government, the NDP, took over in 2017, and there were a series of recommendations that came out of that, many of which were implemented, some are still the subject of First Nations consultation and around the province, so that's mostly done. And the most of the actions have been done, and some still to be done.
The other piece that I wanted to ask you about is the grants in lieu program.
Yes.
And so you pay net property tax and grant payments to local governments. What is that used for?
Yeah, so we're Crown, and so we're not subject to local taxation, right? So we have a system, essentially a voluntary system, where we pay grants. It's called grants in lieu of taxes, and it's made up of different components, but essentially it's based on a value of land that we take up and mill rates, and the money goes to local communities and regional districts around the province, and they use it in their revenues budgets.
Any other audience questions? My final question to you, Surrey has the largest urban Indigenous population. We've seen the Musqueam, the Squamish Nation really engage in very innovative development projects. How is BC Hydro working with our First Nation communities to innovate?
Yeah, so we are the second largest landowner in the province, which is after the provincial government, so which is just a measure of the space we take up in the province, and we've got assets all over the place, which means we've impacted First Nations all over this province and continue to impact them with new infrastructures. So we have, since the early 90s even, but more intensely in the last 10 or 15 years, been very deliberate about building relationships with First Nations, particularly those where we touch them deeply, right, with our infrastructure. And what I would say, elements of that plan or elements of that work include benefits to First Nations through various economic activities, sometimes benefit agreements related to projects or procurement. We've done over $1 billion of Indigenous procurement, where we target contracts to Indigenous businesses or businesses designated by First Nations. We've done land deals with First Nations and various kinds of forms of accommodation around the sale of land. We've done quite a bit of work on training and development with First Nations. And I think we've actually worked on a lot of things together. So if I spent a lot of time on the Ruskin project, which is out in Maple Ridge. We did that work with the Kwantlen First Nation. They were involved in construction. They were involved in problem solving on the when things came up on the project. We found 2 archaeology sites on the site where we hadn't expected them to be, like right on the dam almost itself. Had to work through that. We did an agreement with them that included various benefits and land and such. And interestingly, there was a real element of art and symbolism in the relationship. So they ended up putting some beautiful, extraordinary art panels on the dam, which you can see. You can see them online, or you can go out and see them. And we got to really know them through that whole process. That was, that project itself was 7 or 8 years, and really, I think, was an example of reconciliation in action, where we left the relationship better off by the work we did together. And so we are trying to do that across the province, and we've got some great examples of success. We've got some examples where we need to do more and are doing more. But it's something I think we all share. We all have a responsibility in advancing reconciliation, and I think what is great to see is it's kind of moved into the mainstream, and individual citizens in our province are thinking about how they can be part of the process of reconciliation.
Chris, thanks again for coming. We really appreciate you coming out. Rick Mann from IOM Property Group. Just on the heels of Sean's comments, one of the examples of a good partnership between BC Hydro and developers was the Build a Rebate program that was introduced a little while ago. When I first started my career, that Build a Rebate program was very valuable because the cost of the infrastructure and the rebate almost offset each other from dollar for dollar. Fast forward to today, those infrastructure costs have kind of gone up 2, 3, sometimes 4 times, depending on the scope, but the rebate has stayed relatively the same. In your discussions with ways to partner up with developers, is the Build a Rebate program one of the things you guys are talking about?
Yeah, that's a great feedback. So we have a number of examples, and I mentioned our extension policy, where the tariff or the rules are based on fixed dollar amounts, either that we pay or contributions to the customer that's connecting. And what we've all experienced, that those fixed dollar amounts don't reflect the current situation, right? And even before this surge of inflation, they weren't current, and now they're really not current. So we are, with the extension policy, for example, we're committed to look at that, and I can certainly take back that program, and that's a principle that the program should reflect the same kind of dollar commitment. So we're happy to look at that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up because Rick made just a great comment. So, for instance, in the township of Langley, there's a lot of very burgeoning neighborhoods that are just growing incredibly rapidly, thousands of units going in. One neighborhood, it's $11 million to bring the feeder line from Fleetwood.
Yeah.
That's what he's talking about. Like, how can any one developer front that, really?
Yeah, and those rules are kind of set for us. We're happy to look at them and revisit. That's the extension policy. I said it's a tariff or a set of essentially regulations that are established by the approval of the Utilities Commission, and they really govern the treatment or the sharing of costs between new customers, who are the folks that are connecting in Langley, and existing customers, right? And the current tariff is weighted, as you say, it puts a lot on the new customer. And as I said, we are looking at the extension policy, and that's feedback that we've heard from the developers, and we're absolutely up to looking at doing that differently. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Karen Reed-Sadu. I'm the Executive Director with Surrey Crime Prevention.
Karen.
On a small scale, but a big scale in my life, is our volunteers are out in the community. We have over 500 volunteers in Surrey Crime Prevention. We have a really great partnership with BC Hydro, where our volunteers participate in the Community Enhancement Program, where we remove graffiti off of hydro property throughout the city. As a result of that, we have engaged so many youth who are vulnerable, who are part of the court-appointed hours through the courts, where they have to do their community service hours. And it's a great learning experience for them to understand the value of civic pride. And knowing that the work that they're doing, removing graffiti and cleaning up the city, is great. And I just want to thank BC Hydro for their continued support over the past 5.5 years.
Yeah.
So it's a great experience for our volunteers, who are all, by the way, under the age of 30 and committed to our city in a big way. Thank you.
Well, I have to say thank you back, Karen. That's such a wonderful program. You were telling me about it earlier, and we struggle in this province generally with getting graffiti off the system, and it's hard to keep up, and it's fantastic that your organization is taking the lead with that, and we're able to help in a very modest way, and you're getting all these extra benefits, growth and development for those folks on the side. I think it's a fantastic example for the rest of us, and I really appreciate your work and the work of your organization.
Hi there, my name is Joanne Zoletta with BD. I'm a senior civil design manager there. I've been working with our team quite regularly over the past 5 years with regards to BC Hydro. We do have a great relationship with our current rep there, which is great. But one of the questions that we have is recently, over the past 2 to 3 years, since atmospheric floods had happened last year, we've seen an influx of time required for designers as well as operations to really, I guess, coordinate or get, their schedules just have increased. Just wondering internally whether or not Hydro is considering or reviewing what that internal planning or coordination looks like.
Can you just say what organization were you with?
I'm with BD.
Oh, BD. Oh, developers. Okay. Yeah. So we have added resources. So, during COVID, there was a very sharp but fortunately short-lived drop in development and connections, and then after that, it just roared back. And so we've experienced some of the pressures that broader society, probably less so around turnover and finding people. We have added a bunch of people in that group that we call it distribution design and customer connection group. So there's more people in that group than we've ever had. One of the challenges they're going through right now is we've got more trainees in the group than we've ever had. So there's a pretty intensive effort to bring folks up to speed on the role. And we are using, wherever we can, we're getting support from external firms like Stantec and ZE Power are doing great work for us on engineering on the distribution. So we're trying to bring all the resources we can to deal with the volume and the complexity of that, and also just getting process improvements out of it. One of the reasons we're looking at this extension policy change is because there's quite a bit of work associated with the back and forth with customers on the costs, right? Because it's all based on estimates, and there's, always explaining there's quite a bit of activity around that. So if we can move to more standard charges and a different arrangement, it actually takes a lot of work off those, and they can just work on the design and getting the drawings out the door. So quite an intensive amount of work to improve those processes, and you should be seeing improvements, and we'll see improvements in the outcomes over time.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other audience questions? Chris, I do have one more question for you. Surrey has the most number of newcomers and refugees. and with Canada's immigration plan that was announced 3 weeks ago, and the fact that the Surrey Board of Trade, we have delivered trifecta economic partnerships between newcomer organizations, public and private education, and then placing them in businesses where there are labor and talent shortages. Given all of the demands on BC Hydro in terms of electrifying our future, what is your perspective? What are the challenges you're facing around talent and labor recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, we're experiencing the same challenges that many of your organizations are facing, and I think we have a bit of an advantage. It's a pretty good, seen as a pretty good job, and our turnover tends to be a bit lower than many organizations. We do, I go every month, well, probably now every other week, to our new employee orientation sessions, and we've got a class of 30 new people joining, and so we're bringing lots of people in the organization, and it is an increasingly diverse population, especially at the intake, in the frontline groups that we hire into, and so the diversity of the company is growing as a result. It's a competitive market for staff, right? Like none of us have ever seen, and I think in this province, and you just have to work much harder at getting people, attracted to the role and keeping them happy. And some things we're doing, we've got a pretty aggressive hybrid work model. So coming out of COVID, we've took the feedback that employees like working from home. We've got a fairly aggressive version of that we've got in our organization, so people can spend time at home. They also spend some time in the office, so there's that networking and coordination going on. We're pleased that we fall on a wage scales. We fall under the same kind of guidelines that affect the broader public service. So we're happy that we're getting these agreements done. Our collective agreements have expired, so we think the increases that are available to deal with inflation pressures will help us attract more people and retain more people. And we continue to try and ensure we're providing meaningful work in a good environment so people want to stay, and generally they're staying. And generally we're getting the kind of people that we want to get. But it's one of the biggest issues for any employer today.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for responding to all of our questions. A round of applause for Mr. O'Reilly.
Thanks so much.